Hey, everybody, welcome back to View from the Top podcast, where we help growth-minded men who desire momentum in their business, their family, and their finances get through the valleys and up the mountain to their very own view from the top. Hey, if you're listening right now, you are probably thinking of joining a peer advisory, mastermind, or maybe some type of business networking group. I mean, after all, that's what we promised in the title, right? Is we're going to dive into these. And frankly, it's tough to narrow down and decide, which group might be best for where you are at and what you need. Well, good news. Today's episode will help educate you in making an informed decision. And as a gift to you, we've also assembled what I think is the most comprehensive list of available groups with a top 7 questions you must answer guide to help you decide on the group that you would be in the best place to accomplish the dreams and goals that you have for you and your family. So we announce how to get that guide at the end of today's conversation. So be sure to hang out, listen in, and listen through. All right, without further ado, let's get in the studio. The guy that's been hitting the gym and casting the rod. Welcome, Big Hay.
Come on, casting the rod and in the gym. I like those two things. That's good. You know what's funny is I used to hate going to the gym, and I've started enjoying it, even talking to my trainer about maybe doing a few more sessions a week. And so I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm starting to really enjoy doing it. Fishing's been terrible, though. I just want to tell you, Wally, this has been the worst year for fishing for me since I can remember fishing. And I don't know what the problem is.
Is it like worse than getting to the lake or worse than like you're not catching?
No, not catching.
Okay,
yeah, it's like
fishing.
I get there,
You're not
I'm
catching.
fishing, I'm not catching. And I'm like, what is the world? Hickory Lake is noted for all the tournaments. And I think that, to be honest, I'm my own worst problem because I've got that new live view where you can see the fish, you can pull up, and you get, my wife said it's cheating. I said, I know, I love it. But anyway, I think that's what's happening to fishing. All these young guys have got live view and they're cleaning the bass out. I was like, what in the world is going on? But yeah, the gym's fun. Fishing sucks, but the fishing's going to be better. Here we are in the fall. It's going to be a little better, hopefully, prayerfully. How you been, Wally? You been doing good?
I'm doing well, man. Talking about the gym, I started up about, I don't know, it's been about 6 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
I think back to the gym. We got a new gym that opened up, brand new facility right at the front of our subdivision. And so it's like a 3-minute drive for me. I could walk if I wanted to. And I've been getting in there and doing some group fitness, which really isn't my thing, I thought. But it's interesting how just being in a group of people elevates accountability. It's not so silly,
It does.
but it just does.
Yeah.
And man, isn't that ironic? I said that. I didn't even think about it, but that's kind of exactly what we're talking about today.
It is. It is. Yeah. It's an option that was available you were unaware of and now is serving a need. Isn't that interesting how we don't know what we don't know? And then sometimes we discover something that's really been meaningful and helpful along the way. And that's the reason we have a growth mindset, right? We don't have a fixed mindset.
That's right.
We have a growth mindset. And as we kind of dive into what we're talking about today is different masterminds, peer advisory groups, board of directors, whatever you want to call them. I started thinking through this a little bit. And Wally, it seems like that the opportunities and the choices and the decision fatigue that we have to go through because there's so many choices today.
There are.
I'll be honest with you, and I don't do good oftentimes when there's too many. Robin gets so mad at me. We'll go to Baskin Robbins to get ice cream, and I'm like, there's 30-something flavors in here. I don't know which one I want. And so I was like, give me vanilla or give me chocolate chip cookie dough. That's my favorite, by the way, Wally. If you ever want to buy me ice cream, chocolate chip cookie dough.
Nice.
Is the thing. We were in the construction industry for years, built high-end residence, small commercial, prior to me retiring, 13 years ago. And I remember back, I was thinking about this little bit, this decision fatigue situation that we put ourselves in. And we were building, pretty high-end residence, and most of these homeowners could afford anything that they wanted. And it took twice as long to build these houses because they couldn't make decisions. they were like, when you're building a $200,000 house, you got oil rub, bronze, and, nickel, to choose from on the hinges. But when you're building $1 million house or $2 million house, it's unlimited, the choices, and they could never decide. It would take forever. We had to factor that into our margins because we knew that we were going to be tied up on these homes longer. I think it's coming to that today with everything that we're dealing with. And it even goes into these mastermind groups, peer advisory. There's just so many things. When I started thinking about this a little bit, I thought, man, it used to be simple. And this is probably an elementary example, but back in the 1700s, there was one manufacturer of soap. That was it, right? There was one soap that you could get back in the 1700s. And now there's countless brands in the United States alone. Yeah, it's countless. I mean, it's like, really? Do we need that? Robin asked me, what kind of
craft soap? There's craft. There's a soap store now. Buff City Soap. It's literally a store of soap.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. We use goat milk soap. I'll give him a little shout out right now. Robin loves that soap. Jim's a great guy. He was in our mastermind group for years and years and years. Great guy. We've watched that business grow. But she says, it makes my skin feel soft. And I'm like, okay, Robin, whatever makes your skin feel soft, I'm interested in that. But then when you think about some of the modern day things that we're dealing with today, thought about cryptocurrency. Like there was Bitcoin, right? When it first, back in 2009, there was Bitcoin.
That wasn't that long ago. Was that?
No, 2009. Yeah, it's not long at all. 15 years ago, there was Bitcoin. That was your choice in cryptocurrency. Wally, take a stab at how many opportunities there are now when you are talking about cryptocurrency.
Just with cryptocurrency.
Yeah, just cryptocurrency.
300 to 500.
9,000.
What?
9,000. And it's like, really? We went from Bitcoin to 9,000.
Are those like active?
Active currently. And they're growing with leaps and bounds. Doge, go buy you some Doge. That's not even a real thing. Here's what's more embarrassing than that. I bought some. It's like, what? I did. I bought some Doge and actually made a little money on it. But anyway, that's kind of funny. But, talking about the topic that we're talking about today, back in 1957, there was one peer advisory group. Now, there were other things prior to that. Carnegie was involved in a mastermind group, and he attributes a lot of his wealth. So there's a lot of those guys. But officially, there was one peer advisory group, and it was known as the Executive Committee. Some people know it as TEC. It was back in 1957. But it's now known as Vistage. We want to give a shout out to Vistage. They do a great job. Robert Nourse in Milwaukee is the guy that discovered that and put it together. And he really wanted to kind of aim his efforts at CEOs and business leaders. And he kind of wanted to have a real structured environment. He wanted it to be confidential in nature, which we've adopted some of those principles ourselves. But it was one, and now there's literally hundreds of groups. Like where you look everywhere, somebody is starting either a mastermind or they're starting a peer advisory group. Some of them call them networking. Some of them call them focus groups. And we've done a lot of homework on this, and I'll be honest with you, I'm going to give you the kudos for doing a lot of the homework because you've really navigated through a lot of the options, the things that are out there. And we've had our own experiences. You and I have been involved, and I think I've been involved in these peer advisory groups a little longer than you, but you've really, really dove into it. And I do want to talk about just for a second, some of the variables that we might want to use as we think about becoming a party, an interested party in one of these groups. But here's what I want to give a little bit of personal testimony. And I don't want to be self-serving in this as we talk about this, but we do want to talk about the realities that we've been involved in personally. Yeah. And I want to tell you, I was thinking about this even prior to us hitting the record button. I would give anything if someone had introduced me to this concept when I was first starting my career.
Oh, man.
Because I didn't have a clue. And I was thinking about this, and even as I jotted down some notes, I thought, well, there's too many things to even write down. We could talk a whole episode in this one thing I'm about to say. But like, I didn't know my butt from third base. I didn't have a clue when I went into business. I didn't have anybody around me. I didn't have anybody to instruct me, to encourage me. And when I look back now, I'm almost embarrassed. Like, when I look back now, I think about, I didn't have written stated core values. I didn't have a written mission statement. You know, I didn't have KRAs or KPIs. I didn't even know what that even meant at the time. I didn't have anybody to teach me how to scale. I didn't have anybody to teach me that the most valuable asset that there is other people's perspective. I was like, I got in there, I was a knucklehead. I was a hard-headed guy, business owner, determination, perseverance. I didn't tell anybody when I messed up. I just fixed it privately. And I'm like, I wonder how much better off I would have been today, financially and personally and spiritually, if I had had somebody to direct me, help me, guide me, similar core values, and understand how to really grow a business effectively. And I spent 2 decades owning numbers of businesses without the aid of any help. And today I'm embarrassed to admit that.
Well, I mean, it's like, how would you know any difference if you don't know? You know, back,
you don't know what you don't know.
Back
right?
in that day, I mean, I'm not going back to was it 1957? You said that the first one was kind of organized.
Right.
Were you alive then? Yeah, you were alive then, right?
I wasn't. No. 61. I was born in 61. Don't make me older than I am.
There weren't a lot of these.
No,
there weren't a lot of these groups. I would say until I know. Which book? There's a guy that talks about mastermind groups. It's a popular book. I can't think of it. It's a short one. Not Norman Vincent Peale, but can't think of the book. Anyway, they talk about these masterminds. And you mentioned Carnegie and some of those guys as well. But, you know, historically, when I did look up a lot of this information and look back and did some research, and our team that helped, you know, they were very small, private, like typically very high net worth groups, right, that were meeting. And today, even over the last 10 years, like you said, that's drastically changed. And so when you were in business, you had been in business over 40 years, different times, different places, different businesses. And, you know, those really weren't talked about or that popular or that well known. It wasn't until 25 years ago that you really kind of got introduced to it's part of your story, actually. Yeah. Kind of introduced to the first idea of a mastermind, like a peer advisory group.
And I pushed back on it when I was invited. I was like,
you didn't want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. But first of all, when the guy invited me to join, I'd never heard the term mastermind. He goes, I want you to join my mastermind group. And I'm like, what are you doing there? Like, I don't even know what that is.
Who's that little cartoon dude that's like, it's like an old cartoon about I'm going to mastermind of the world, take over the world.
I know. It's like, what are we going to do? I thought it was illegal at first. I was like, what are we getting in there? We're going to rob banks or what are we going to do? And this guy, he started laughing, kind of like you're doing right now. When he invited me, he goes, Big A, just come to the group. Let me introduce you to the guys. And I went home and told Robin that I didn't want to do it. And she said, why don't you just give it a chance? And I'm like, you know what? You know, I'm going to tell you, and I've said this to others that have heard me do podcast interviews before. You've heard this story, but it's like, I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to be transparent because I had some areas of my life that I was embarrassed about. Yeah. And there was things that I was pretending that I knew that I didn't. And there was debt that I had that was overcoming some obstacles because I was too bullheaded to do it differently. And so it was expensive education. And then I didn't want people to know that Robin and I argued over certain things. And I didn't want them to know that I had teenage daughters that were knuckleheads sometimes. And I was like, I don't want the world to know that stuff. And so I was reserved to joining any groups because I didn't want people to know that I didn't have it all together. I wanted to lead them to believe that I had everything figured out. It was pride. It was ego.
We all struggle with that at some level, don't we?
Yeah, but what I found out as a result of that over 25 years is that when you are vulnerable and transparent to the right people, now don't go out there and do it to the wrong people. They'll use it against you. But when you do it to the right people, it endears you to that person and it gives you a firm foundation by which you can build something that's remarkable. And so for me, learning that took a number of years. Like when I went to that first group, I was quiet for the first 3 months. I didn't say anything. Like, I mean, they barely knew who my name was. And it was like, well, then they started divulging things in their life that they were struggling with, and I could identify. I was like, dude, I'm struggling with cash flow myself. And like Robin and I don't always get along. Like we got this roadblock in our marriage and I don't know what to do. It's like she's stubborn, I'm stubborn, and we've reached this impasse. And I remember Ron Doyle telling me about him and Barbie. He said, Big A, he said, Barbie and I have been married longer than you. And let me tell you what we did when we reached that. And I went home and I talked to Robin about it. And she said, why didn't we think of that? Like, I don't, and I'm like, I don't know.
What you don't
it's
know.
like, I didn't. Yeah. And so, but that went into relationships and that went into resources and networking and challenging and accountability and structuring your business and teaching you to scale. And I was like, it's a whole nother world out there. Like I didn't even know this stuff existed. And from that point, I can show you on a graph how our businesses took off. I grew personally. I grew spiritually. I was held accountable. And I was like, man, this is an incredible way to do life and to do business. And so, yeah, but we find ourselves today in like, how do we choose? Like, okay, right, how do we choose? And I know you've done a little research on this and there's different buckets and there's different things. So why don't you highlight that a little bit in some of your discovery?
Yeah, sure. We were doing the research on this. There's everything from like high level CEO stuff, and we'll dive into some of these, you know, all the way down to like one-on-one coaching. That's not really something we're talking about today, but there is a place for that. So let's kind of work through these. If you're in primarily talking to business owners today, right? Those guys you're out there listening in the audience where you have a business, you got a family.
Or high-level decision makers.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Business owners, high-level decision makers.
Yep. So if you've got like, there's groups out there like, let's say Vistage, you mentioned Vistage and C12. They are definitely designed more along the C-suite or that CEO president type. There's many other ones too. And like, we're going to have all these ones we don't have time to even list today. We're going to have all those in that download at the end. So be sure to look for that. But lots of them that are out there, but really for those high level CEO types, they have unique challenges. They have unique things they're trying to solve for in their businesses that say, you know, someone else may not. There's different groups that serve in different industry verticals. So, like, you know, there's strictly in manufacturing, strictly in marketing, strictly in certain types of marketing and manufacturing, and there's topical group niche. You know, we just did an episode last week with Jim Cockrum.
Jim Cockrum.
Yeah, and he focuses on what? Like Amazon sellers trying to create
e-commerce.
Yeah, e-commerce. And so silentjim.com, that's it. It's a very private niche. Real estate investing groups. There's lots of different, I mean, how many different types of real estate investing groups, you know, are out there to help you get your brain wrapped around. And there's subsets of that, right? Inside of, there's multifamily, single family, all of kinds of stuff. There's marketing groups. If you're into marketing, we have one in our Champagne Marketing with Derek Champagne for marketing leaders like that. They focus.
That's all he deals with, right?
That's all they do. Yeah. Right. They strictly focus on marketing. We
want to give a shout out to them too. If that's a space you're looking for, Derek Champagne does an amazing job with that Champagne Marketing. And so reach out to us, reach out to Derek. We can hook you up with that. But in a niche market, in that vertical, man, they're crushing that space.
Yeah, they're doing well. There's general marketing groups. We're all familiar. Probably the first one we've all heard about, right, is Chamber of Commerce. I mean, that's the one that probably everybody hears about, knows about. I don't know if you've ever been to one of those. I know you have, but guys listening out there, have you ever tried one of those? The vast majority of guys that I know that go there get a little disappointed. And we'll talk about why some of the reasons are for these different types of groups, how you might fit, how you might not fit. We have some questions we're going to talk about in just a minute. So there's B&A groups that they're strictly, really primarily for networking. Right. Similar local to Chamber of Commerce. And so you've got those types of groups, and there's a bunch of those out there. And you've got what I like to call whole person groups. You know, those groups that focus on, they're not just niched in, they're not just on marketing, but I think of it as more of alignment, So they're more like life alignment type groups, right? So selfishly for us, we know, everybody listening to this podcast, you know that we're involved with Iron Sharpens Iron. And that has a community and a mastermind, right? And so we focus in there on all areas of life. The ISI Man 5 Pillars of Transformation, and that covers personally, professionally, relationally, financially, and spiritually. And so there's other groups out there as well that do similar things to Iron Sharpens Iron. They're not just focused on one little thing. They're taking, holistically, but those are life alignment type groups. Like you're probably not going to go there. You're not going to come to ISI. We're for Christian businessmen, right? Who desire momentum, have families, have businesses. And so you may find another one that's totally opposite.
Sure.
You may find, you may find a women specific one. You may find age specific one, right? You may find a startup or scale up, and they have life alignment to them. So there's lots of different ones out there. And then there's the one-on-one coaching type stuff, or even group coaching, which is a little different than I would say like a mastermind or a peer advisory or board of director type group, but they still can have value. The point is it's a choice. So in all of what we just said, I know we just put them in like 5 categories or so, but
right.
There's literally hundreds.
Wally, I want to give a little context, if I could. I'll pause here for a minute because I want to say something and I don't want us to skip over it. I want to kind of give a word of caution to all of us, not just to us, but to everyone. So when I first started getting involved in a mastermind group, we'll just use that language for today's call, mastermind group, right? We know we're talking about very diverse peer advisory, board directors, all the same, but let's just call it mastermind.
Yep.
My sole focus at that time was business. Like once I discovered that there was benefit in this, I went all in on the business side. And through the course of my life, our businesses became successful. But I tell a story often where I came home with a pocket full of money to a house full of strangers. And that is the reason that we try to focus today on the whole man, because there's value at different times in different segments of your life. And we get a lot of people come to us initially for the business, but they discover later that they've grown their business, but they've done it from a relationship capital standpoint. They're like taken from their spouse, they're taken from their children, taken from their colleagues, their other peers. And they're like, man, what do I do now? It's like, I got some money, but I don't know my wife. Or I've got some money and I never go to my kid's ball game. Or I've done well, but my buddies at church, are out doing other things and I don't have a relationship with them. And it was a real wake-up call to me to go, you know what? Just think of it as kind of a 3-legged stool. It's going to wobble if something is not appropriately paid attention to. And so for me, I had to go back and divvy up my time a little bit and go, okay, money's important. I want to make money. I need it to do the things I want to do, but it's pretty sad to have a lot of money and my wife don't want to go to a movie with me or doesn't want to go on vacation with me. Or my girls are like, oh, you're coming to the ball game tonight? And I'm like, man, that's not well. And so what I discovered through that is that we can have a measure of success in one area, but if we're not paying attention, it could really be costly in the other. So whatever you're doing today, if you're listening to this episode and you're like, man, I got to make money. Yeah, you do. And I want to help you do that, but I don't want you to lose sight of these other things. And we have built it to where there's 5 key pillars of your life. And regardless of what you're doing professionally, you're going to deal with these things. And that's personally, professionally, relationally, spiritually, and financially. And so you may not be paying attention today to all 5 areas, but you will pay attention one way or the other at some point.
You get to choose to, or you get to be forced to, right?
Yeah, one or the other, you're going to pay attention to it, right? Through force or through election.
Yep.
And so I just want you to keep that at the forefront of your mind as you're deciding what's good for you as you go forward.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I some of the questions, some of that foundational criteria, I think that we ought to consider. And you just mentioned some of it, right? There may be times when, we want to lean into one area of our life more than another. there may be times when you need to focus on one thing more than the other, but you can't ignore any of them.
It's not really going away because you're ignoring it. Right.
Yeah. Let's dive into some questions and some criteria. Let's focus on criteria first. So, if you think of like foundational criteria based on your experience and your observation, what are some foundational criteria to like different types of all the groups? Like there's different choices, but there's criteria to kind of choose from which one might be better for you, suited for you. You align with this, don't align with that. What are some of that criteria you can think of?
Well, I can speak to personal preferences as well as what's available. But for me, and I think most people would agree with this statement, even though we're virtual in nature, in person, there's some dynamic about in person that's invaluable, right? And that's in everything that we deal with.
Having some FaceTime. Yeah.
Yeah, it just is. And we try to cover both. Like our meetups are virtual so that we can tap into people all over the world. And we're literally in 5 countries now. And so we want the ability, because you may live in a community that you don't have people that can help you in person in your community. You're like, well, I live in a small town and those people are not here and they can't teach me. So for you, I would say, hey, virtual is great, but let's maybe twice a year get together in person, which is exactly what we do. I love to get in person because, I'm a relational guy. I love to hug you and shake your hand and, have a meal with you, pray with you, encourage you, challenge you. Like I love to do those things in person, but I'm not going to not meet because I can't meet in person. Like virtual, we were popular using virtual way before COVID, right? I mean, we've been doing virtual for 11 years when people didn't even know what Zoom was. We started using a virtual platform. And so we've done that. So everybody has a certain preference, but don't not meet because you can't meet in person, right? There's virtual opportunities.
And some groups, like you mentioned, ISI does both. Some groups only do virtual. They never meet in person. And that, can have value too. I think that depending on what it is, if it's very topical and very specific, I can see where, you're really not probably in that one to build lifelong friends. Right. Because the way it's set up, it's not set up for that.
The information.
Right. You like information.
Right.
You're going to take it, you're going to apply it, you're going to move on. So that type of setup I think is great. And other ones, like I know a bunch of them meet once a month, right? In person, and they don't meet at all any other time. They just do once a month thing. They meet in person and they go on. And you may find for you that time wise and stuff that works out well, or you may be like, hey, it's really not quite enough. Right? Like you just, every group does it a little bit different and you got to kind of find the cadence, but those are there's the virtual only, in-person only, and then there's kind of that hybrid.
I think it's important to say, Wally, we're not here to say there's a right or a wrong way.
Yeah.
There's options, which praise God for options. I love options because at this point in my life, this option may be best. At this point in my life, this option may be best. And so you've just got to weigh it out, what you're trying to accomplish and the best vehicle by which you can get there. Mm-hmm. And so our responsibility is to make you think outside the box of things that are coming or things that you need to consider as well. That is the reason for this today. Not to say our way is the right way. It's to give you the option. The other thing that I think is important to mention is there's cost associated with some groups. There's free that is to some groups. You can say or argue the point that there's value in one over the other. Here's typically what I've seen personally. Historically, when it's free, people don't place a lot of value and there's a lack of consistency. That's not always the case, but I'm saying historically, if something better comes along that is going to take the place of your free meeting, there's no value for you to go to that because you're no skin in the game. You haven't lost anything.
No skin in the game, no buy-in. Yeah.
So here's the danger of that is that it's hard to catch up to speed when you come back. Mm-hmm. It's like, because you've missed a lot that's transpired in the lives of the other participants. Ours, there's a cost associated with it. And I know when I'm paying, I pay attention. It's like I've got an investment and I want to get an ROI. I want to get a return for that investment. And I think historically that's true for everyone. I paid for this and I would like to get this in return. But then the other thing is there's limited accountability when it's free. It's like, hey, there's no skin in the game. I'm not asking you to hold me accountable. I'm paying for people to ask me the hard questions. I'm subjecting myself to the scrutiny of other people, and I'm paying money to be in alignment. I want to be around people that share similar core values, that have a mission statement, that are determined, that are persevering to accomplish and aspirations to grow. It's like, no, I'm paying to be in this environment, and it exponentially grows me in every one of those areas because I'm focused, I'm paying attention. There again, I want to say for the third and final time, there are exceptions that things are free and they're valuable. But what I haven't seen is anything that's free that's consistently valuable over an extended period of time.
You know, the difference there, I would say, is I see a lot of organizations and businesses and things that they'll give away a lot of information for free. Mm-hmm. And I found this interesting, over the years, is that people will give away the what. Here's what to do.
Mm-hmm. Not the how.
Not the how.
Mm-mm.
And because the how is where the magic sauce is. Right. And I think that, information can be fairly cheap. Relationships are actually expensive. I mean, real relationships are expensive.
There's a huge cost.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm not talking just money, right? Like there's emotional investment and time investment and all of that. So I've seen masterminds. I know you have too, that I'm sure guys listening today have been like, yeah, I've seen those. There's masterminds that are, $49 a month, a couple $100 a month. I've seen them 10,000 a month. I've seen them 50,000 a year, $100,000 a year. Now those are extreme cases,
right? But they're out there.
But here's something that I'm beginning even now, my stage of life where I'm at, start to recognize that, man, like, and maybe I shouldn't say this on the podcast, but I think this is a reality. The kind of people that you want to be in the room with to learn from don't want to be with people that are in the room not to learn and not to be committed. Mm. And so when you make something appropriately priced, think about your own product and your service as a business, right? Like there's that exchange. You in a mastermind type group, like I want to know that we're all coming to the table and that we've got some buy-in, because then I'm going to be invested and people are going to be real and not mess around. And those are the kind of guys that I want to be around. I don't really want to be around guys that just want to show up periodically or, not really invested. And I'm talking about like the core, like, close circle of influence, right? Circle of impact type guys, right? Not that you don't have friends and you don't have acquaintances and you don't have business networks. You do, but you're talking about people that you're going to learn from and you're going to speak into. Most guys that I want to be around aren't going to sign up for free.
No. Well, they don't, because they don't equate any value to that. It's just mentally, you don't equate any value to something that's free.
Yeah.
And Dr. David Kruger has kind of worked with me. He was head of psychology at Baylor University, and I hired him years ago to coach me. And he was talking about when we invest something, there's a feeling of commitment. We've got buy-in. We listen more intently. We're more involved, and you've got other caliber people that are around you that are similar in nature. And when I start thinking about this, it's for the most serious things of my life. We're talking about how to grow my business, my ability to earn a living for my family. We're talking about my relationship with my spouse, the number one person in my life. Like, I want people that are bought in and they're invested in the relationship, that they're willing to make a commitment to give me advice. Like Robin and I have been married 45 years now. And hopefully we've got another 20, 25 years ahead of us. And we still have challenges today, but people that have context to our relationship can help me make good decisions. And then I start thinking about my spiritual walk. Like, I want people around me that have a similar lens that can say, hey, this is how we can help you make a decision in that. Like, these 5 pillars are the most important things in your life. This is not like buying a car. This is like how you're showing up and living your life. And are you going to grow? Are you going to prosper? Are you going to scale? Are you going to have those lifelong personal relationships? Are you going to have that connection with people that really care? See, here's the problem is a lot of people say, I don't have time for that. Well, when you need that advice, it's too late to build it, right? You got to invest it now where you can get the solid advice when you're ready to scale, when you're ready to sell that business, when you're ready to have that discussion with your children, right? You can't build it when you need it. You got to build it before you need it. And so that's the reason we're looking for qualified guys that are willing to invest to be in that arena.
Yeah. I think some additional criteria before we move into some questions that we need to ask ourselves. But it's got last piece of criteria is, there's men only, there's women only, there's co-ed groups. And I think that they're all, depending on which group you choose, is depending on what you're trying to get out of that group. And everybody has personal conviction around this. I know there's some groups that are more business focused. If the reality is, if they're co-ed, you're probably not going to dive into some of the relational and the personal challenges that you're having.
Right.
That's not a bad thing. It just means that particular group serves that purpose. Right. So they're going to be more focused on one thing or the other. Whereas if you do have a women only or a men only environment group that you belong to, and we're speaking to men today on this podcast, that there's things that you cannot say, cannot bring up, that you cannot talk about, that are really in your heart and your mind that you're dealing with in a mixed environment. You can't do it. You don't do it at church, which if you're going to do it anywhere is where you should do it. You're definitely not going to do it in a secular world.
Right.
So I think that's really important for guys to think about, that depending on what you're looking for and the group you're looking for, as you kind of answer some of these next questions, where you land, like that should be part of your criteria. All right. Questions that we should be asking ourselves. I think the first one is, what stage of business am I in? There's guys that are, listening today that are like, have full-time jobs, and they're like, hey, I'm starting this gig on the side. And so I'm kind of startup mode, right? Starting this thing part-time. There's guys that just went all in as solopreneurs. And there's guys that have been in business a while that have a small team that are they're scaling up their business. So they're growing and adding. And then there's guys that are kind of like, hey, we've done well in our marketplace and we're growing there, but I need something different now. And so all these groups tend to serve, like C12, they have minimums, right? ISI has some requirements when you apply. Right? Other types of groups that are out there, they should. If they don't, I'd be very leery. If there's not some criteria to get in, it means that they haven't figured out who they're best able to serve and help. And so, depending on what stage of business you're in, sometimes it could also be, what stage of life you're in. Right? Some of them span the gap. Right? Some of them are going to fit well for a 25-year-old, and some of them are going to fit better for a 65-year-old. And so you have these variants of stages of business, stages of life, seasons of life. And I think it's important to think about those in light of how you're looking. What else do you think are the questions that I should be, that guys should be asking?
I want to comment on that particular one you said for a second. This also comes with training yourself to have a different mindset. We're really big on serving givers and not takers. And what I mean by that is you may be in a different stage of your life. We had one guy that joined years ago and very successful, sold his company to his son. And I said, what is it? Mike's his name. I said, Mike, what is it that you want out of ISI? He goes, I don't want anything. I don't need anything. I'm here to give. Like, I'm here to encourage. I'm here. I'm like, well, what do you need? He goes, I don't need anything. I've made plenty of money. I got money for the rest of my life. My wife and I've been married 40 years. I want to give. And I'm like, can I hug you? Like, if we were in person, I would hug you right now. See, because we can't always be the taker.
Mike's actually in co-pilots, by the way. I do want to speak out about that. Mike's in co-pilots, and he's still in it a long time. And
he does a remarkable job. I call him periodically and just say, hey, man, what can we do for you? He goes, no, what can I do for y'all?
He's a good dude.
And I'm like, oh, my gosh, like we need more Mikes in the world. But my point is that you're going to be in some of these groups, and periodically there may not be an immediate ROI, but there's a guy that joined ISI 3 years ago. I won't call his name, but he struggled for the first year that he was in. And then the second year he started seeing the value. But this year he called me and he goes, Big A, can you meet with me? And I said, yeah, sure. He said, one of the guys in the group owns this software business, and I said, yeah, I know him well. He's been in for 10 years. And he said, well, he conceptually gave me an idea, not even knowing he gave me an idea, but I've taken that concept and applied it to my business. And I've got an opportunity to turn this into a multi-million-dollar business in a 12-month period of time. And he laid it out. Wally, I'm embarrassed to tell you what I'm about to tell you. The first thing I said was, how do I get involved in this? And he started laughing. And he said, well, I'm not needing investors right this minute, but maybe later. I was like, and I said, let me ask you a question. If you hadn't have been in the group, this is a self-serving question. I said, but would you have discovered this on your own? He goes, in a million years, I wouldn't have thought of this without being in the mastermind group with this guy. So my point is he put 3 years of the work in, and one idea is fixing to revolutionize the way he does business. And it could make him extremely wealthy. But he was patient. He built the relationships. He did the work. He showed up. And through those relationships, he's able to start a business that appears to be very successful.
So a question that I hear from what you're saying is, guys that are listening today, they need to ask themselves, how committed am I? Like, how far do I want to go?
It's not a short term, get in, suck the group what they're worth in 90 days or 1 year and get out. It's like, no, man, take a long-term approach to this, and it could radically transform the way you do business. 'Cause here's the thing, when you get in a group, these guys in the group are growing as well. And some of the things that they didn't even know at the time could be beneficial to you later. And so now they know your heart. They know you're a giver. They have context to your life. They can help you make real decisions. And so when you say, what stage of business am I in currently, don't be so short-sighted that you cheat yourself out of a great opportunity later. That's my only point around when you say, what stage of business am I in? I think the other thing is, and some guys are in multiple groups. Some guys are in niche, only verticals. They're like, hey, I need help with this space right now. Okay, well, we'll make a suggestion. Go to this group like we did Derek Champagne earlier.
Hang on, though. What you're asking is like, if a guy, so we're talking about questions that guys can ask themselves.
Yeah. Should I be in multiple groups?
Multiple groups? Is that what you're asking?
Right. That's the question. It's like, is one group enough? Well, I don't know. It depends on what your need is. Like I've joined other groups for specific things, and I've been in groups that were whole man, like we're talking about now. It's like, I don't know. I mean, it depends on what your needs are. You may need one-on-one coaching. You may need to be in multiple groups. What is it that you're trying to accomplish?
We've got guys in ISI that are also in C12 and Vistage.
Sure, absolutely. And they love it. And it serves two different needs at this time in their life. And so I don't think that's a question that you can answer forever. I think there's specific in nature to where you're at currently. What are your needs? Here's the other thing. This is not an expense. It's an investment. And you've got to look at it as an investment. It's like, this is a tool to help you accomplish this thing. What is that thing that you need? We have a lot of guys in multiple groups.
Yeah, that's good. Another question I think we ought to ask ourselves is, sometimes, a lot of guys are loyal, and loyalty is good. And yet there's seasons of life, stages of life, things change. I tend to probably stick to the same thing in general too long in my life. I don't pivot quick enough. I lose some opportunities on that. But even with groups like this, right? Do I have to be, that's that question. If I say yes, am I committing my life to it? Is it you mentioned earlier about 90 days in and out.
Sure,
and is it as a couple of years? We talked about commitment. How do I balance that? How do I think about that when I go to get in? Because some guys are like, hey, if I'm going to make a commitment to this,
yeah.
is this going to be a forever thing? is there a thing that should I reevaluate it every 12 months or every couple?
That's where I'm going to get to. That's where I think the answer is. And we may even adopt some of these principles for our own industry going forward. But I was in the group that I told you about for 12 years. And annually, the Eagles, it was annually. Some people know this story, some people don't. But I'm going to say something, and not for name dropping sake, but to show you the value long term. Dave Ramsey's the one that invited me to join his group with Dan Miller, Ron Doyle, Ken Abraham, Jeff Mosley, some of those guys y'all may or may not know. My point in telling the story is a lot of people say, oh yeah, who wouldn't want to be in that group? My point is they weren't then who they are now.
That's right. They weren't.
And
they were starting out pretty much.
We built our businesses right together. And it's like, so when you say, how long am I committed for? I don't know. I don't think there's an answer for that. I think you got to evaluate it ongoing, because for me personally, building those deep relationships, even today, I just got together with Ken Abraham, went to his house. He's got a new book launch that he just launched, a new book called No Address, and they shot a movie. And while I was at his house, he introduced me to some of the top movers and shakers in Nashville and people in the movie industry. And it was all because we've got a 25-year relationship, and we were in a group together for 12 years. It's like it keeps giving. It keeps on giving the value. And if you get in and out of these groups in a year or two, you don't get the opportunity to build those lifelong relationships that could open doors for you. Even at 64 years old, I'm still having doors opened. I got an invitation to speak on a public platform that night from the guy that makes the decision, because I met him through that relationship. And you're like, well, Big A, I'm not you, and I wasn't in that group. But I said it earlier, they weren't then who they are now. Mm-hmm. And so your group could be the next Eagles, whatever group you're in. And so don't try to make a decision. I'm only going to get in for 12 months and get out. Well, you may be really cutting your nose off to spite your face. There may be an opportunity a year or two from now that comes up that changes the trajectory of your life.
Yeah.
And so I would just say annually reevaluate. Am I in? Make a commitment. Let's get back in. Let's do it again. And then just look at it annually.
Yeah. My observation is if you're thinking about it monthly, usually it's economically driven. So maybe you shouldn't have done it in the first place.
Exactly.
If you can't afford it, you got to be a good steward, right? If you can't afford to get in something, you need to find something different until you can.
Yeah.
Because you've got to be in. And if every month you're like, oh, I got to pay this month, or this is, it's like, you're not showing up with a full cup. You're not showing up ready to give, to dive in, to listen. All you can think about is like, oh, it's going to be on that expense sheet again. And man, if you're in that place, like that's not the best time, because you're not going to be able to learn and get and receive. You're not going to be able to give effectively either. So I think that's part of the timing when you think about, when you're going to be in these groups.
I'll say one quick thing about that. Your attitude shouldn't be, am I going to have to pay this again next month? Your attitude should be, hey guys, I'm paying. Y'all need to help me figure out how to make more money.
There you go. I love it.
Like if you use that mindset rather than, being upset over whatever hundreds of dollars it is to join, get in there and generate more income. You can't save yourself into prosperity. It's like, we got to generate more revenue. And how can I do that? Some of the other reasons and excuses that guys struggle to join peer groups, and I hear these all the time. It takes too much time. I'm like, are you serious? Like, what are you saying? It takes too much time. You'd rather be over there doing a task rather than building a relationship that could open up a pipeline partnership for you that is going to give you 100x return on your time. And you're saying I'm too busy. Listen, I don't know about you. Dave Ramsey, last I looked, was pretty busy. He never missed. He was always on time, and he stayed the entire time for 12 years. I think he's done pretty well, right? And so Ken Abraham, the most noted ghost author on the planet, and he made time, but you're saying I'm too busy? It's like, really? Jeff Mosley, one of the top record labels in Christian music, he spent 12 years, and you're like, you're too busy? Like, please do not use that excuse. If you're going forward, don't tell me that you're too busy not to be in a peer advisory group. I don't know if it's Carnegie or Carnegie. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I was told it's, but listen, the guy was worth in today's dollars, $300 billion, and he attributes his wealth to his mastermind group. It's like, don't tell me you're too busy. The other thing is it costs too much. A lot of people say that. It's like, well, that's relative. Like, I don't know if it costs too much or not, but if you're getting a 10X or 100X return, or somebody gives you an opportunity like this member in our group right now, that he's going to have a multi-million-dollar business and he pays what, $650 a month to be in a group. And it's like, okay, I don't think that's too much. It's like, what are you doing? What is your marriage worth? What is your relationship to your children worth? You're like, oh, I'm never at ball practice. I'm never at piano recital, and I don't get home. They're in bed. And I really, you're going to grow up and you're going to miss your children. And you tell me that it costs too much to get accountability, to learn how to scale your business in a manageable way. There's great value in those relationships, in that opportunity with your children, and to scale your business faster. So I don't think that we can use that excuse.
I like the idea, when we say it costs too much, we don't have a problem, investing in a tool for our business that's going to help us increase X or do X or make us more efficient or do this or do that, the right kind of software to create some automation to do certain things. Yeah. Right. And unfortunately, we don't often put information experience in the same bucket. Yeah. And man, I tell you what, like you said it earlier in the very beginning, and it's so true. If I could have learned perspective and gained perspective in these groups that I've been in and being in ISI now, I don't know if it's true or not, but I feel like for myself, the most value I get is not actually what someone says directly to me.
No,
it's what they say to somebody else.
Right.
If you're not a fly on the wall, if you're not part of that conversation if you're not in there, you don't hear it.
Yes.
And so you're navigating all of these things you don't even know is even possible or there. Right. It's insane. I don't know how to, I don't want to use it's priceless, but I don't know how to put a price in my experience. Like
the relationships,
I hear so many guys talk about,
deal flow. Yeah. I'm making, I don't mind saying, I'm not going to say what it is, but I make $150,000 a year off of two guys that I met 5 years ago in ISI that I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I not been in.
Yeah.
It's like,
true.
I would not have been making that today. And I make that recurring every single year as a result of that relationship. Just a couple other quick things. People say I can start my own. Well, you can. Right. Mm-hmm. I started my own. I did this, and you can too, right? It just takes time. We're 11 years in. I mean, it's a lot of work though. Let me just tell you, if you think I'm going to hang a shingle out and get a bunch of people, that is not the way it works. We have a team now of about 10 people. We spend every day, all day long building the things that we've done. And I've done thousands of podcast interviews to get people in, and I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in marketing and promote. If you want to do those things, you can start your own and you can grow your own, or one group.
Just to say,
one group. You can do
one group
and not do all that.
Including our facilitators. We have a team of 19 people. And then also, it's interesting, the next Forge episode that's coming up is actually, I'm sure you listen to that. It's actually about a guy that has worked at starting his own mastermind type stuff. And, we're not going to be talking specifically about that, but like just the fact that the amount of effort and time and the challenges that he's had, he just wants to serve people, love people, and yet he's finding it's a challenge. So starting anything, if it's not your thing, you said something a while ago I thought was really good. And there are organizations, obviously we talked about a bunch of them, and they're going to be in that list that you download at the end here. There are plenty of organizations that focus on this thing.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're doing something else, trying to focus on this thing, you may get lucky. You may. But from what I've seen, chances are you're going to spend a lot of time spinning wheels, going through people. It's going to be a side business. Just treat it like that if you do start your own. I also hear too, kind of the last excuse from guys who struggle is that, I don't really want to be genuine or transparent or, being accountable. I mean, you kind of used that with Robin in your example in the beginning. You said that I don't want to do that. Like an excuse. Really, it's a limiting belief at the end of the day, right? You think that people think you're more important than you are, or they think more important of you than you are. People don't care. They don't. Not they don't care. They're not. I don't know how else to say that. They just don't.
Yeah.
I fall into that trap, but yet you get into these groups where you're in alignment, and they're almost, I don't want to say non-biased, but unbiased, right? They have a definitely they can give you the advice and the encouragement and the challenge,
no emotional
and insight.
Yeah.
Emotional, there's not the emotional attachment there that you may get from other places. So, all right, bring us home. We got to close this out.
Man,
this is longer, but there's been a lot of good stuff here for guys.
We could talk for hours and hours about being in these mastermind groups, whether it's our group, another group. God designed us to be in community. Mm-hmm. Without a question, you can go so much further if you're in a group than you could alone, because I always say that isolation is the enemy of excellence. And if you want to do well, you want to grow, you want to scale, you want to really level up in your relationships, you want to have that great relationship with your spouse, with your kids, you want to be happy within yourself, and you want to have guardrails and boundaries and accountability. You can't do that stuff alone. It just doesn't happen. I tried it for 20 years in business, and it does not work as well as it does when you're in community. So just explore this. Just ask yourself these questions like, why is it important to get connected with a group that you can commit to? Don't get in a group you're not willing to commit to, though, right? Don't do that. Don't waste their time. Don't waste our time. Don't waste your time. You're like, hey, Big A, I'm excited. I'm determined. I want to get in these groups. I want to understand. I want to take my life to the next level. But here's the thing you've got to ask yourself. What if you don't take action? What's going to change in your life? Are you going to just stay right where you're at right now? Are you happy where you're at right now? You say, well, I'm pretty good. Well, maybe a mastermind group's not for you. But if you're like, no, I love what you're saying. Like, I want to level up. I want to grow. I want to be committed. I want to give. I want to serve. I want to be at home. I want to be present with my kids. I want my relationships to be amazing. You've got to get around some other people. So I just want to encourage you today that if you're going to do this, make the long haul commitment. Say, I'm going to make the investment, and I'm going to level up, and I'm going to listen to Wally and Big A, and I'm going to go for it, and I'm going to live life like it's supposed to be lived. And the reason that we want you to do this is so that you too can have that view from the top.
Hey, as promised at the end of this episode, we wanted to give you some of the homework we've done and allow you to leverage that. We put together an exhaustive list of masterminds, peer advisory groups, along with the top must answer 7 questions to help you narrow down your choice. So you can get that by going to isibrotherhood.com/which one. That's isibrotherhood.com/which one, all one word. And we'll also put the link in the show notes. And you can also get it just in the resources section at isibrotherhood.com. Well, just want to say thank you for joining us this week. This week's episode is brought to you by Iron Sharpens Iron, as a brotherhood designed specifically for Christian business leaders, owners, and entrepreneurs, where faith and business intersect, wisdom is shared, relationships flourish, true success and real significance is achieved. You can learn more about that at isibrotherhood.com, where you can get connected. So thanks again for listening in today. We will see you next week.